Mr. Vice President, I want to talk a little bit about your VP pick. We're narrowing in on the time frame that you had identified as when you would make your announcement. Are you still targeting early August? And how many of these people, how many finalists do you have, and are you going to be able to meet with them in person because of COVID?
I'm going to try to figure out how to trick you all so I can meet with them in person. You got crews outside my house. I don't think it matters. What I said was that I'm going to have a choice in the first week in August, and I promise I'll let you know when I do.
In person, do you think?
What, I'm sorry?
Will you be able to meet with them face to face?
Well, we'll see.
You're going to have to wear masks.
We have to wear masks.
Will you get tested, do you think, if you have to do that for COVID?
I'm not prepared to say much more.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. I'm supposed to call on people, right? Okay. Mary Bruce, ABC.
Vice President, this pandemic is taking a terrible toll on American lives and also the economy. But are there specific states right now that you think should halt their reopenings and roll things back? And if so, which states?
Well, I'm not going to comment on every state, but any state where the rate is more than 1-to-1 here should be, in fact, rolling back. Look, from the beginning, in my view, the president had given us a false choice. He said that we have to get back to work and also deal with COVID. You can't get this country going again unless you get COVID under control. And so he has been really late in the game to getting around himself wearing a mask, for example. We waited for, as you've heard it 100 times, the Columbia study showing that if he'd acted just 1 week earlier, there would be, I think it was 37,000, wasn't it, 31,000 more people alive. 2 weeks earlier, 57,000 or whatever. The point is that there's no clear message. There's a federal responsibility to lay out really clear guidelines. It's like opening up our schools. What's happening now is there's a national, we need the CDC. They had very strict guidelines. They were going to do it first. They've watered those down, in my view, what I've seen. Just talking to the docs that I deal with about 3 times a week and give me an hour and a half, an hour and 50-minute brief. And so I think that what's happening now is even in the states where it's about, freedom versus physical safety of your neighbor and communication of the virus. Even in those states, they're now locking down. And they're locking down counties which have high returns on testing. The president says his answer was, we'll stop testing. So we're not going to know, okay? We won't know who has the virus. I think it's really important.
Thank you, sir. I'll take this off. You alluded to this in your remarks, and I bring it up because polling is bearing this out a little bit. But are you running against President Trump or for President and for Joe Biden? In other words, you alluded to this, but a lot of voters seem to think or are saying that their support hinges on the fact that you're not the president. So why perhaps should they be voting for you and not just against the president?
That's why I'm laying out these detailed plans. Look, I'm running because Trump is the president. And I think our democracy is at stake for real. And what seems to be the case is many Americans, those who don't like me and those who do, view me as the antithesis of Trump. And I believe that I am. And when I announced, I said I was running because I thought it was essential to restore basic decency, the soul of America. But I really meant it. It wasn't, remember I got criticized early on for saying that. Now everybody's talking about the soul of America, decency, honor, respect. The second reason I said I was running is because even back when people were talking about how well the economy was moving, I thought the middle class was still getting crushed and working class folks were hurting badly. all this talk about how happy they were. I didn't see any numbers showing they were so happy, because people were getting paid badly. Corporate America was overreaching in terms of who they felt they had an obligation to deal with at all. And thirdly, the thing I got most criticized for, and understandably, was I said we have to unite America. And they said, well, that's just a pipe dream. You used to be able to do that, Joe, but everything's changed. Well, if we can't unite America, we're gone. We're dead. Democracy's dead. It requires consensus. That's not hyperbole. It requires consensus. And that's why I used to be sometimes critical when people stand in the debates. They say, I'm going to by executive order do the following. Well, that's Trump. He doesn't have the authority to do half of what he's doing by executive order. That is not democracy. And so what I hope, the good news, I think, is the bad news based on all the million polls that have been done by your network and everybody else, is the good news is the bad news. People know me. They know me warts and all. And the reason why I'm running is because I think I have two qualities at this moment that aren't always the most relevant qualities needed in a president. It changes. Every election is different. One is that I know a fair amount about American foreign policy, and I have relations all over the world. And those who don't like me respect me, and those who do like me respect me. I know how to get things done internationally. Doesn't mean I can solve every problem, but I understand the national security and intelligence issues. That's what I've done my whole life. Trump has no notion of it. None. Think of how he talks about Putin. My God. And he talks to him privately and says he's not going to tell you whether he raised the fact that Putin's paying the Taliban. Number one. Number two, I have been relatively good at bringing people together in the United States Congress and politically. It's going to be a lot harder. Things have changed. A lot harder. But depending on the outcome of the election, in terms of the Senate and House races, it can become very much within reach. Because, and I'll say it again, I've never questioned anybody's motive. I've never lied to a political opponent and misled them. Even when I was in the Senate, I'd say, I need your vote on this, but I got to tell you, you vote for it, this part of your constituency is going to be mad at you. I've never misled anybody. I don't expect anybody to voluntarily agree to be in the second editions of Profiles in Courage. I try to recognize the limits of where they can go and still find a principled compromise. And so there are the two things that I think we very badly need now. And lastly, I think that notwithstanding the fact, I think I have laid out the most detailed plans on the economy and on issues relating to health care and the rest of any president in modern history. I mean, it's awful detail. If I'm elected and this passes, I'm going to be good to go down as one of the most progressive presidents in American history.
I have a quick COVID question in this regard. The Florida Marlins today announced they had to suspend their season. You curious, because I know you get briefings on how COVID should be dealt with and how society should be comporting itself in the midst of all this. What do you make of how sports leagues are starting to play again? And frankly, for that matter, what do you make of how schools are considering all this? The president's considering, or has said he would withhold federal funding from states or school districts that don't reopen, or that don't reopen. I mean, you must have thoughts on all this.
Oh, I do. I've laid out, in the interest of time, we'll get you a copy of my school reopening plan, what I think is required in order to do that. There's some circumstances you can do that, but you have to make significant investments to do that in order to provide for protective gear, in order to provide for social distancing, in order to have testing and tracing and all those things. It's possible, but it's a significant investment, and it requires the certainty that teachers as well as students are going to be protected. And where you're in a high intensity area where there's a lot of COVID, it is not a good idea. Evidence the fact that rhetorical question, I'm not expecting you to answer it. Do you think the president all of a sudden decided not to go to Tallahassee because he thought it was the interest of the public? He decided, Jacksonville, Florida. I'm thinking of the capital. To go to Florida, to Jacksonville? Well, because even the Republicans down there said, we don't want you doing this. We don't want you doing this. They're just, it's a mistake. And so I think that there are guidelines that have to be made much more specific by the CDC. They should let the scientists speak. Let the scientists speak. I'm happy the president is back holding his conferences on COVID every day. I don't know what the hell he's adding to it, except it's good he's wearing a mask and saying the right things, mostly. But this is about science. This is about science. This is about expertise. This is about transparency. And we've got to make it available to the American people.